Hey everybody, welcome back to another 10-minute Marvel video. I'm Petter, and today we're talking Daredevil Born Again Episode 4. Gonna do the normal thing here, talk non-spoilers first, then spoilers. I will definitely let you know when we're moving into spoilers. This episode was an interesting one for me. I suspect there was a decent amount of this episode was stuff that had been shot the first time around. And I'm not sure that it always landed perfectly for me. Though there's also clearly a chunk of kind of new stuff added to this that I think actually was pretty interesting to work with as well, and kind of kicks off what I consider we've had kind of the prologue to this point, and now we're getting into, or kind of first act, I should say, not really a prologue, first act, or first arc, maybe, of the story. And now we're getting into this next arc that I think is actually going to be really interesting, and I think this was definitely a transitionary episode between first arc and second arc of this season. I kind of suspect we're only going to get really two distinct arcs here. And I say that it was inconsistent for me. That doesn't mean that I didn't like the episode. I think there were some really strong moments to this episode that I'll talk about in the spoiler section. And we still continue to get good character progression. However, this episode maybe was a little bit lacking in terms of the tension build, at least in certain areas. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, this felt like that bridge between the first act and first arc and the second arc. And I think that actually kind of plays out because we know that episode 5 and 6 come out next week. So it is going to, much like they did episodes 1 and 2, I suspect we're going to see a launch of a new arc, or potentially this could be a short mini arc before we get back to kind of where this new plot is going. So that's just kind of my spoiler thoughts, or non-spoiler thoughts, I should say. Let's move into spoilers. And spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. You have been warned. Spoilers. Alright, if you're still here now, let's dive into some spoilers. This episode, I think what really drew me in and kept me moving with this episode was the wonderful work that we got to see with Wilson and Vanessa Fisk. And Fisk in power, and the struggle that we're seeing with Fisk from how to do stuff kind of by the letter of the law versus maybe his true nature. He talks about how he learned from his father in this episode. And I thought that was a nice kind of callback to some of the stuff that has been developed previously and about the type of man that his father was. And you can feel that tension for Fisk trying to walk that line between what he saw demonstrated in his life growing up and what he believes that he should be or wants to be as the mayor. Because it's almost like he's living into and fulfilling what he thinks his father's destiny was. It's an interesting place to put Fisk as a character, and with that, there's the struggle between him and Vanessa. We get the scene in the therapy where Heather Glenn keeps Vanessa behind and asks if she feels safe, and she says she does. And honestly, I truly believe that she does feel safe, and I believe Fisk that is not who he is. He saw that and hated that in his life growing up. But there is still this violent nature that we see. And I love how we actually get this dinner scene at the end of the episode compared to previous dinner scenes. When Fisk is in mayoral mode, he eats these small portions of chicken and asparagus. He is healthy. He is presenting as this man of restraint and self-control. But then in this scene, we see that he has Adam locked away. But not just that, he is sitting down to a gluttonous feast of sausage and pasta and cheese and rich food with a glass of wine. It is kind of this extravagance that we see. And he's doing it and throwing it in the face of Adam, who he has locked away. And I think it's really nice to see the dual nature of Fisk here, that I think it's getting teased at and getting played out through this series. And the Fisk Vanessa stuff for me really drove this episode. And I mean, there's more to the Fisk stuff too, with excuse me, the aide messing up, kind of leaking some of the Green Initiative plans that Fisk has, and like the threat that Fisk offers to him at the end. I think that it's just always telling this story of Fisk is on that razor's edge sort of situation. And I love how it is telling that story and how that is working together. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing when Fisk does go over the edge as mayor. And will it be around Vanessa? Because I think that's a question that I have right now in my head is it going to be around Vanessa? Because we got our introduction really to Muse. I suspect we've already had our introduction. There's kind of an expectation. We've already had our introduction to Muse, in terms of Muse being the person who came to Heather Glenn at the book signing and talked to her. But now we really saw Muse. We saw Muse draining the blood from a victim and storing that, being the thing that Muse uses to create the artwork. And I like that, like I said, we're seeing this second arc. Now, with Matt, I do feel like this episode was a bit more inconsistent. The stuff with Punisher I thought was really good, and actually the stuff with Punisher and going back to his apartment with Heather Glenn and the practicing, and then as Daredevil, just the weaponry in the middle of the night, I thought it was really good. And it opened up a question, or the door has been opened now for Matt to kind of answer the question of how does he handle Foggy's death. I know other kind of reaction people have talked about, like, it didn't really feel like we got enough of that previously. And I think there was a point to that. The fact that, well, we haven't gotten any of it is because he hasn't actually addressed it. And I like that. Now, I do want to talk about, too, this other case that he works on, where it's the person who was arrested for stealing Fiddle Faddle, caramel corn. And I thought that part was okay. Now, they tied into a few things, I think, in okay-ish ways, but it just felt like it was, we have this footage, we want to demonstrate kind of the struggle of Matt and the legal system and him trying to do the best that he can with it. But it was a little bit, I don't know, forced or thrown in there. And that, to me, was the one part of the episode where, sure, there were elements that were tied into other spots, but really felt kind of that out of place legal drama, and didn't, not really out of place, but it felt legal drama that didn't continue to build towards anything. That's why I feel like this is kind of a gap episode to restart that second arc. Now, I do want to just really finish up here with kind of thoughts on episodes 5 and 6 that are coming out next week, because they could go two different directions. One can be Matt putting back on the suit, and now Fisk is going to be pushed further because of that. I could see it going that way, and Fisk really starting to push for that anti-vigilante. The other thing I think it could be is it could be Frank Castle episodes. I think we could get a couple of Frank Castle episodes, him stepping out of that. I guess there's a third option as well. We could really dive into Muse. And maybe that is the more likely option, because we were set up at the end of this episode with Muse. So it could really be that deep dive into Muse. We get to see Heather Glenn, Heather, I'm just going to call her Heather from here on out, working with the person who is Muse, not knowing it. And we could then see like an understanding of what's Muse is doing and what's happening. So those are the three different options that I could see going forward, but let me know your thoughts on it down in the comment section below, and your thoughts on episode 4. If you enjoy this content, check out the other videos we have here on the channel and the 10-Minute Marvel podcast, where we'll be talking about Daredevil Born Again coming up. Well, episode 4 coming up this week, and if you want to catch up, you can do that here on YouTube. Click onto the channel, subscribe if you haven't already. We appreciate everybody who has. Click that notification bell to know when new videos come out. Then click on the podcast tab and catch up on the 10-Minute Marvel podcast over there. Or you can search for 10-Minute Marvel wherever you get your friendly neighborhood podcasts from. But with that, we'll see you next time.